Most of the United States is pushing through the cold winter months, which usually means no sports car racing until the weather warms. But for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League, Assetto Corsa Competizione brings a new medium for racing, a highly detailed racing simulator allowing CrowdStrike friends and family to race together all year long. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to CrowdStrike Racing. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined tonight by Ryan Marine and Kevin Bohm for our second race in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. Ryan, welcome aboard for the second race of the season, this time at Barcelona.
Awesome to be back, Kyle. Great to have Kevin along for the ride as well. Round one was so much fun, we figured let's do it again. We've got a full schedule yet to come here in 2021, so plenty of things to look forward to. But right now, all eyes on this Barcelona circuit, and looking forward to seeing what our CrowdStrike friends and family have in store for us. It was fun at the Nürburgring, and I expect it to be the same here in Barcelona.
Absolutely. CrowdStrike is the official internet and cloud security provider of SRO America. Effective cybersecurity means you see and stop threats like hackers as fast as possible. Of course, CrowdStrike and AWS have been leaders in securing a remote workforce since long before the pandemic, and they can race remotely too, and they're glad to have staff and the friends from SRO take part here tonight in the second round of the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. Qualifying is now about underway. We have two races here tonight, Ryan, the first of which is the pro race. This is the more serious of the two. There's a more casual AM race coming up a little bit later tonight, but each 25-minute events. We're going to qualify for them here in just a moment, but I would like to introduce Kevin Bohm here tonight. Kevin, welcome. Thanks for joining us here again. Driver in TC America, and tonight a commentator for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. This is awesome to be able to kind of be involved with some racing in the off season. So really excited to see what we have to watch here today.
So Ryan, we've got qualifying right now as we roll into our 15-minute qualifier. Qualifying at this racetrack in particular, I think maybe a little bit less important than the Nürburgring. When we ran there, that track is a little bit trickier to pass. This place is a little bit faster flowing, more passing opportunities. And here's a look at the track map for Barcelona. It is a 16-turn, 4.2-kilometer racetrack. It all begins with a very fast run down to turn number 1, a right-left combination through turns 1 and 2, and then the right-hand sweeper through turn number 3, into turn number 4. That's another right-hand corner, then down to turn 5, left-hand or deep on the brakes there. Camber will help you roll through it all up to turn 6, which is a kink. Then 7 and 8, a hard left-right chicane. Watch the curb on driver's right as you climb the hill towards turn number 9, a fast right-hand sweeper. Then the run down to turn number 10, a hard passing or great passing opportunity, a hard braking zone down to about second, maybe even first gear, and then a very tight and twisty complex through turns 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 where that sharp chicane is, and then the run onto the front straightaway again for turn number 16. So, Kevin, there's a lot of really challenging corners here on this racetrack, but GT3 cars in particular can take a lot of curb around here, so you can get pretty aggressive around this racetrack.
Yeah, that's right. This track is really unique because it has a really neat combination of high-speed turns and then some really technical tight turns that you have to be very, very precise. And that kind of lends itself into some passing opportunities and really a fun flowing track that honestly, this is one of my kind of favorite tracks to drive in the sim. So I'm really excited to see these guys attack it tonight.
So, Ryan, we've got about 20 drivers here, 23 I count, on our timing and scoring for our qualifying session. Some of the drivers that we recognize from real-world racing, Michael Herzen is here in the number 71. Nate Vincent is here, both from FCP Euro. They've joined us. They're in, at least Michael is in the Mercedes-AMG GT3 Evo, the number 71. Robbie Montanola is here as well from marketing from GT World Challenge America. Glad to have him here tonight. It's a cool mix of CrowdStrike and AWS employees as well as some real drivers and crew members from World Challenge.
Yeah, it's a really neat combination of personalities and experience levels. Guys like Michael Herzen and Nate Vincent, who you talked about, who are active racers in TC America, although I think they might be stepping up to GT4 racing as early as later on this year. You mentioned Robbie Montanola, who works for SRO America these days, but he has a background in racing himself, coming through the Skip Barber racing ranks and then ultimately into some of the junior open wheel formula. Raced a couple of races in the old Star Mazda Championship back in the day against some names that race fans might recognize. James Hinchcliffe, I believe, finished third that year in points in Star Mazda. Marco Andretti and Graham Rahal were active that year. Mark Wilkins was part of that field that year, Brian Sellers. It was a pretty star-studded lineup when you look back on it, and our Robbie Montanola was right there in it. And now doing his best to get this whole thing organized behind the scenes and to able to step aside and actually take part in it, which is something that he really enjoys and is a neat element that we can add to this whole equation.
For sure. Got some space on the front straightaway to put in a flying lap. Currently 15th on the timing and scoring. Josh Staffen is here, the number 230. He's from CMS Racing, which has helped organize these events. And Josh is a pro in the sim racing sense, Kevin. And we've seen pro drivers take to the sim, and we've seen sim drivers take to pro racing in recent years. So there's a lot of crossover in both directions, and you just happen to be a driver that races in TC America. You've also driven in the sim quite a bit. You're joining us here tonight, but tell us a little bit about Assetto Corsa Competizione and why this is such a cool environment to drive a GT3 car in.
Well, I mean, I think it really starts because it's so immersive, and really the sounds that you hear are just unbelievable, and then the visuals, they're everything's so realistic, and we're not even talking about what it feels like yet. So once you're actually behind the wheel and you're starting to drive, it actually translates really well to what you experience in a car. Of course, you're not feeling the G-forces, but everything that you're seeing and hearing is what you would hear and kind of visualize in a real car, and it really sucks you in and makes you believe that you're really behind one of these GT3 cars.
So cool to hear that from a driver, Ryan. Of course, I could only ever dream of getting behind the wheel of a GT3 car, but you can do it here in Assetto Corsa Competizione. Again, keeping the CrowdStrike friends and family together during the off-season. Now, speaking of the season, it's not too far away. I know we're still in the middle of January, but our World Challenge schedule picks back up in March 5th through 7th at Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma, California. Very different from Barcelona, for sure, but excited to get the season back underway there in a couple months. I also know that the CrowdStrike car with George Kurtz is actually racing in IMSA as well next year in the 4 endurance races. That's a really exciting development.
That is. It's really great to see him get that opportunity and have CrowdStrike represented in another form of sports car racing here stateside. I know George has been able to branch out a little bit and get some racing in major endurance races before. Went over to the Total 24 Hours of Spa last year and competed there representing SRO America and CrowdStrike, of course. But then this opportunity arises to go race in one of the biggest sports car races in the world, the 24 Hours of Daytona, and some other endurance racing within the IMSA platform as well. So really excited about that, and happy as well that we should have George in our championship for next year too. There's such a great history of crossing over between the two championships in the U.S., one more endurance-based, one more sprint-based, but still a great opportunity for teams and drivers to show what they can do, and great that George has found a home on both sides.
And looking down through the rest of the order and finding some familiar names, I do see Sam Michaels in the number 16. He's in the CrowdStrike Mercedes. That's a very familiar-looking car. Scott Michaels, though, looks like, has he made a car change from the last time, Ryan? Weren't they running identical Mercedes last time? And now it looks like Scott has picked the M6 GT3.
Well, thank you, Scott. We appreciate that, because having the same initials and then the same car made things a little bit complicated for us. So this should simplify things a little bit. You see the fun Valkenhorst livery on this car, one of the classic BMW teams racing anywhere in the world, no pun on classic BMW, which races in SRO America. But Valkenhorst, so successful, did a really remarkable job in the Intercontinental GT Challenge race that ran alongside SRO America at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway this year. And it was something of a renaissance year for this BMW M6 GT3 in 2020. One of the older GT3 models that is out there competing, but it speaks to what the SRO has been able to do with his balance of performance to bring very different looking race cars and make them pretty equal. And even some of the older GT3 models still have a chance to show what they're capable of. Had a very successful year last year in endurance racing. Did this BMW M6 GT3 with wins at Indianapolis and at the Nürburgring 24 as well. And it's obviously well represented here in the sim racing world.
And right now jumps up to 8th on the timing and scoring. Chris Walsh in the number 721 has gone to the top. And right now we are qualifying, basically setting a quick lap. And this is how we're going to grid our 25-minute pro race here tonight. So, Kevin, qualifying is, of course, a very important part of any racing weekend. But in the sim, even more so, I think, because we don't have a whole hour long or 90 minutes like we do in real GT World Challenge America to kind of sort out the positions. You're going to have 25 minutes. And if you don't qualify at the front, you have a lot of cars to pass in a short amount of time.
Right. I mean, essentially you want to kind of make your job as easy as possible. And if you start up front, then you have a lot less work to do than if you have to start in the back and fight your way all the way up through the front in only 25 minutes. So that's where qualifying is really important. And it's really hard to kind of put all the individual pieces of the lap together. We only have 15 minutes of qualifying total, and as you can see, there's interaction with traffic, and you have to deal with that and make sure you can get a good clean lap to where you can actually show what you're capable of and put a really fast lap down.
Sam Parmet jumps to the top of the board in the number 98 Porsche. Jeff Corral, the number 3 McLaren, pulls to a stop. Robbie Montanola goes up to 4th quick. Josh Staffen 5th. Then Sam Michaels. Ian Burleson in the 27. He is in another one of those McLaren 720Ss. And Ryan, every time we race here in Assetto Corsa Competizione, I have to make a mention of how cool this car looks. It is like Batman's car. It is the coolest looking thing out there. And Ian Burleson driving 7th right now.
Yeah, it's a really great platform, one that I'd love to see come and join us in GT World Challenge America here in 2021. One of the newer GT3 models out there at the moment, and actually coming off of a bit of a win in the real world here recently. Competed in the Gulf 12 Hours last weekend and got a big win for the 2Cs Motorsports team that we expect to be doing some SRO Europe racing this year. Has some history racing in British GT as of late, but a win on home turf for them, and great to see the McLaren brand well represented once again. Our favorite thing about it, though, Kyle, is when you get on the brakes and start going down through the gearbox a little bit, this thing spits fire out the exhaust pipes, and I think the two of us have said it a couple of times in various broadcasts. Cars that spit fire are cooler than cars that don't spit fire.
That is the truth. There's Pratik Mishra in the number 720, comes across the line in 23rd, going for another flying lap. Talking about how you interface with this simulator and race at home. You can race on controllers, so you can race on sim rigs with real pedals and steering wheel and shifter to boot. Kevin, building a sim rig for a lot of people that really invest a lot of time in racing simulators, it sort of denotes your personality a little bit. You can really go all out with racing sims. Tell us a little bit about your home setup and what it looks like for you.
Yeah, that you're definitely right there. Sim rigs can vary quite widely, and it really depends on your budget and time. And I didn't have a lot of either, so I used a lot of kind of wood and some determination, and looked at a lot of pictures and guessed dimensions, and built myself a plywood sim rig, and I have a single monitor and a basic steering wheel, and still able to go pretty fast that way. So in the end, you can go really fancy and go fast. You can go pretty simple and still be fast. And in the end, it's a blast either way you do it.
Pratik Mishra moves over for one of the Ferraris to move on through. Really good diversity in the manufacturers here tonight as well, Ryan. Again, we're all just here for fun this evening, but we've got a Porsche, 2 McLarens, a Ferrari, the Acura/Honda NSX GT3 in 5th, and a Mercedes, a Bentley, an Audi, and a BMW, all represented in the top 10. So really the strength of GT racing, not only in GT World Challenge America, but across the world, is getting to pick and choose what car you would like to run. And here tonight, a lot of diversity.
That's one of the calling cards of GT3 racing, which we've said a couple of times on the broadcast already. And for those who are new to sports car racing, you could think of GT3 basically as a set of rules, the GT3 rules that give manufacturers an option to take their production cars and turn them into race cars. And basically, whereas some rule sets in the world give instructions to manufacturers and say, basically, build your car to these set of regs, what the SRO has done with GT3 is say, whatever car you have, we have some basic things it needs to conform to, but basically take what you have made already, and we will find a way to make it work on an even platform with the other cars. And what that gives us is the best diversity you're going to find in pro racing anywhere. Kevin, maybe at the SCCA runoffs or something like that, you might see more diversity in a paddock, but outside of that, especially in the pro ranks, it's hard to find more variance in terms of the cars that you'll see on a race weekend than you'll see outside of GT3 racing.
Yeah, that's right. It's pretty inspiring to see all these cars, and in a lot of cases, all these are kind of dream cars. You're talking about the Porsches and the McLarens and the Ferraris and BMWs and all of these exotic cars, and to have that variety and have them all competing on an even playing field is it's a testament to what SRO is capable of.
So with qualifying almost complete, Sam Parmet at the top of the board with a 1:44.067 has provisional pole by just about 2.5 tenths of a second. That's pretty close here, Ryan. 0.2 of a second. That's a blink of an eye around a 4.5 kilometer circuit. So very, very close racing, or at least qualifying here at the front of the order for now. In just a moment, we'll grid them up and go for our pro race here this evening. And a little bit later, we'll have a slightly more casual AM race, which will have a slightly smaller field, but it will be another 25-minute race to wrap things up here for the rest of the night. Of course, if you'd like to learn more about the Virtual Racing League and the full on-track schedule for 2021, you can visit CrowdStrikeRacing.com. And we've got Operation Motorsports friends joining us tonight. And again, we've mentioned SRO, AWS, and CrowdStrike folks all helping out and joining here this evening. And we're using hashtag CrowdStrike Cup on social media to talk about this race. Make sure you tweet or whatever else you do. Tweet, Facebook, Instagram, all the places. And make sure that you join us on social and interact with us there as well. So with qualifying complete, we've got a couple minutes to talk about what we're expecting here on this run down to the first corner. Ryan, every time we start a race, the first corner is always the toughest. You can't win the race in turn one. You can always lose it there, though. And we got a pretty long run down to turn one here at Barcelona.
It is a massive front straightaway here at this track, which makes that final sequence of corners, 14, 15, that chicane, and then into the flat-out turn 16, a crucial part of this racetrack. A good run there will set you up for a chance to make the pass, but you talked about turn one, lap one, and how crucial and how dangerous it can be. The field will never be as close together, and they'll never be 2 by 2 all the way through like they are at the start of the race. And so it presents danger, but it also presents opportunity. We might see some aggressive driving there, trying to grab a couple of spots. They're harder to make up once the field all gets up to full speed at one point or another. Unlike the Nürburgring, though, this sequence of corners at the start of this lap, I think, is more conducive to getting through it cleanly. We will see. I think also the fact that there are at least 3 very good passing zones on this racetrack probably takes away some of the incentive to go super aggressive right out of the gate. But racers are going to race, aren't they? And I suspect that there will be some aggression. I just hope it's tempered enough that we can have a nice, clean start.
Well, Kevin, last year in 2020, you were the TCA Rookie of the Year and Driver of the Year, and your team was Team of the Year. So a lot of success there, ending with the TCA Championship. Your thoughts on the run down to turn one, and which track on the 2020 schedule was maybe the one that was the most exciting, the first run down to turn one, and which one was maybe the most nerve-wracking?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Ryan was saying. Here at Barcelona, you don't have a lot of pressure to be really aggressive in turn one, but it's still tempting. And I think that temptation leads to the potential for contact between cars. But there's also a lot of runoff, so it's a little bit easier here to kind of avoid something if something goes wrong. And probably looking back at the 2020 season, the track that made me the most nervous at the start was actually Sonoma, and it's because you're not really starting on a straightaway. The green flag's waved, and you're immediately in a turn, and then you hit the brakes, and you're in another turn. So you go through this kind of immediate turning phenomenon, and you're side by side with other cars, and it's just really hard to stay away from everybody, keep it clean, and still not lose any positions.
Very important, and we're going to get a lap to look around and see this track at a slower pace before we turn everybody loose for 25 minutes. Of course, going back through some more results for CrowdStrike Racing in 2020. 25 podiums in the 2020 season, 10 wins in the World Challenge season, 4 in GT3, 6 in TCA, 4 wins in the Winter Invitational, 2 for the TCR cars, 2 for the TCA cars, 8 second-place podium positions, 3 third-place podiums. A really successful year, and looking forward to more of that in 2021. Of course, as we wait for this to begin, having a look at the weather conditions here. 34 degrees Celsius track temp. That's about 8 or 9 degrees higher than ambient temp. And Ryan, as we know, the hotter a racetrack gets, often the slicker it gets, and that's a treacherous aspect of racing on the hot summer days as well.
Exactly so, and it's amazing how the Assetto Corsa Competizione platform models exactly that. The sensation of driving on a hot, slick track is very well replicated within the simulation itself. One of the reasons it's as immersive as Kevin was describing a little bit earlier. So all of our virtual competitors here, they're going to be taking a note of what the track and ambient temperatures are, and then there are things that they can do to their virtual race cars, adjusting their setup. Things like tire pressure, for instance, would be a good place to start to adjust to the different conditions. And I think they don't necessarily know what the conditions are going to be before race time, so they are using this opportunity right now to take in all of that data, to make any last minute changes that will help their car handle better, go a little bit faster for them, to make sure that they're as prepared as possible for the upcoming 25 minutes of racing as they can be.
Looking at our starting lineup there on the left-hand side of the screen, it's Sam Parmett and Chris Walsh on the front row. Porsche and a McLaren. There's a rear-engined Porsche 911 GT3R and the mid-engine McLaren 720S, and of course the Mercedes-AMG GT3 with Sam Michaels in the CrowdStrike colors lined up right behind them in row number 2. Kevin, a lot of drivetrain diversity here. Mid-engined cars, rear-engine cars, and front-engine cars all in the top 3 positions.
That's right, and they all drive differently. So everybody who's up front right there has to be really aware of how you drive the car and what it likes. And fortunately, they're not doing standing starts, so that makes it a little bit easier. But especially once you get to the first brake zone and the first sequence of turns, you really have to manage the weight of the car to stay in control, especially when the tires are cold and they don't have as much grip as they will a little bit later in the race.
Ryan, every time we race here in a simulator, we have to draw parallels to the real-world racing and why this is a relevant exercise here. And this can be just for fun, as we're doing here tonight. But some drivers will look at this, and again, we're in our pro race here, so slightly more serious, more practice goes into this maybe than the AM race a little bit later tonight. So let's draw some parallels here. You're in a different environment, and maybe things don't translate 100% from the racetrack to the sim and vice versa. But I think one thing that does translate almost directly is racecraft. And what I mean by that is basically the moves you make around other cars are almost a one-to-one translation from the sim to the real world and back. So I think there's a lot to be learned here, especially with some of the pro drivers like Nate Vincent and Michael Herzen that are here tonight. I think they're going to put on a bit of a show here in the midfield. It'll be fun to watch them.
I think you're exactly right. There is that crossover there for sure between the same kinds of strategies that you would employ to try and make a pass or defend your position in the real world. All that carries over to what we do in sim racing. And I think for young drivers in particular that are trying to get used to racing, stepping up out of go-karts and into real cars, that sim racing is a perfect outlet for them to hone that craft, because you can make those mistakes that you need to make sometimes to learn the lesson, but without the consequences of the real world when you're racing wheel to wheel with somebody else. And I do think as well, we look at the youth movement in motorsports. It seems like drivers are starting to race at a high level at younger and younger ages, and yet are prepared for that. And I actually do believe that sim racing has a lot to do with it, not just the karting that has taken off at a young age, but also for drivers who get there that maybe don't have as much of a karting background, that they've gone wheel to wheel with competitors in the virtual world before. So when they get in those same kinds of scenarios in the real world, they're more prepared than some of their counterparts from 20, 30 years ago might have been.
Pace lap is underway. We'll warm up the tires and brakes here You get 1 lap around this 4.6 kilometer circuit, 2.89 miles around here, 16 corners to negotiate, so you'll get 1 lap to cite your braking points and see if the track has changed at all since the qualifying session a little bit earlier today. One more reminder and thank you that CrowdStrike is the official internet and cloud security provider of SRO America. Of course, effective cybersecurity means you see and stop threats like hackers as fast as possible. In 2020 and now 2021, CrowdStrike has been a leader in the work-from-home transition, helping companies protect their global workforce from online threats. Of course, CrowdStrike this season is all about being together. CrowdStrike, we race as one. And as we roll through the turn 3 and 4 area here, you see the weaving back and forth. Kevin, why might they be doing that, kind of moving the car from left to right and back and forth?
Well, I mean, these cars are modeled just like the real GT3 cars, and a real GT3 car needs heat in the tires for them to work. So without the heat, the rubber is kind of really hard, and it doesn't stick to the road very good. So right now, all these cars are weaving back and forth to basically scrub those tires and add a little bit of heat to them so that they have a little bit more grip once the race starts, and they will be able to maintain control once they get to that first turn.
And something I've actually experienced myself driving a Miata at a local, or I should say local, Gingerman Raceway in South Haven, Michigan. Didn't get the tires warmed up and went a little too fast, a little too quick, Ryan. Found myself turned around real fast. So warming up tires of any kind is very important on a racetrack. So Sam Parman in that number 98, that Porsche, will have a little bit easier time getting those rear tires up the temp with a bit more weight over the rear. But the front tire temp will be a little bit more challenging to get in there, but we'll have a 25-minute race here, about 4:14 simulated time here in Barcelona for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. Thanks for joining us. My name's Kyle Heyer with Ryan Marine and Kevin Bohm. The pro race for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League, round number 2, is about to get underway. We'll rack them up and stack them up, double file through the final corner. 23 drivers strong. Sam Parman out front. Warren Laskin bringing up the rear. Here we go. Barcelona, Catalunya, as we get the green flag, and we're racing at Barcelona. Sam Parman fires off and away in the Porsche 911 as they stream down to turn number 1 in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. All the way out to driver's left into the turf just a little bit. Oh, there's a spin. That's Josh Staffan's Acura NSX. He's looped it around in the first corner. Will lose all the positions. He qualified in 5th. Will immediately drop to the tail of the field. A couple more drivers sliding sideways. There is one of the McLarens. We're 3 wide through turn number 3 here, Ryan. A frantic start to this one.
Yes, but largely quite clean, which is good to see. It's tough to see for Josh Staffen, who I'm quite surprised, actually. He's one of the more experienced sim racers in this field. A couple of cars going wide in the background of the shot, and then one just a moment ago as well. But pretty good start here from everybody. I have to say, I'm pretty impressed. Able to temper that aggression like we talked about a little bit earlier. A great start there for Reeve, able to get past Parmet and take the lead. Unless I'm misreading, he's in pit lane, so it is Parmet still out in front. Correct,
just a timing error there. Hunter Reeve back to the pits. Not a great start for him. In the background, getting a little bit racy behind Chris Walsh in the number 721. That's one of those McLarens. Here's Robbie Montanola and a Bentley on the inside. Big dive into turn number 10. 3 wide, that's not going to work.
Yikes, that was an aggressive move from the Bentley up the inside. I think all things considered, people were pretty lucky to get out of that as well as they did. Montanola certainly lost out. I think he might have been able to make up a position, but he saw that big old Bentley coming and kind of opened up the hands a little bit. It forced him to go off track, but it kept everybody nice and clean, and so now they'll try and settle back in. Not even through the first lap here, but plenty of fireworks already.
Montanola up the inside through the final corner, trying to get some traction in that Ferrari. Here comes Zach again in the Bentley. He's the one that made contact and went 3 wide. He's going to get this position as they come across the line, Kevin. Very frantic start. A lot of elbows out here early in the going, but sometimes you got to be aggressive to make up space.
That's right. I think a little bit of this is trying to take advantage of these minuscule opportunities, and sometimes the tires are a little bit cold, and you end up sliding a little bit wide, and you get a little contact. So I think some of these cars are going to spread out just a little bit, and we'll see some more clean racing as the race progresses.
Here's Dean in the 333 Ferrari. There's a car off That was one of the McLarens that was running up towards the front, trying to catch what driver that was. Was it Chris Walsh? Yes, it was. He's going to drop all the way down behind that battle we were just watching, and now there's an Audi that is, I believe, the 88 car, who I think is a lap down. No, he's on the lead lap.
That's Vinny Lima, who's
yes,
on a charge here. Yeah, one of our real-world racers, a lot of touring car experience, and has been racing with us in the various SRO esports series that have been going on over the last year or so, and really starting to round into form. A great start from him after starting further down the order.
And grabbed a bunch of spots behind Michael Hertzen in the 71. That's that Mercedes AMG GT3 Evo right in front of him. Both of them a little bit wide over the exit curbing there. Pretty rough curbing around here as well, Kevin, and you talk about getting the most out of a racetrack. Being aggressive on track limits is sometimes how you're fast, but here it'll penalize you. Some big sausage curbs there, those brightly colored painted metal or concrete raised edges that will basically damage the underside of your car if you run too wide.
Yeah, that's right. You basically want to run as wide as you can and straighten out the turn in a sense to be able to carry more speed. But like you said, the big curbs at some of the apexes and some of the exits will really penalize you if you use them too much. So as a driver, you kind of do a lot of experimenting when you're practicing, and you try to touch each one and you see how it affects the car, and you find out if you can use it or not. And some of them are risky and you can barely touch them, and when you're really trying to put a qualifying lap down, you risk touching it. But here in a race, you might stay a little bit farther away.
And Kevin, I'm curious for you, how, when you're trying to go through that experimentation process that you talked about, how does it differ in the real world versus the virtual world? Are you able to take a few more risks in the sim than you would if you were preparing for a race in real life?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a huge difference. So in the sim, you can take a big risk, and even in a high speed turn, or maybe the walls are really close to the track, and you can still really be aggressive over a curb, and if you crash, you just hit the reset button. But in real life, you have to kind of experiment really small slices at a time. You make a really small adjustment and you see how it feels, you see how it affects the car, because you don't have that reset button in real life. You have to kind of manage the car and manage the risk so that you don't run into a situation where you kind of cause a wreck because you're experimenting.
Side by side into the chicane, there's Josh Staffen on a rebound climb after that early collision down in turn number 1, and he ended up in the gravel, back up to 17th place now, past Matt in the 116 car. Peter in the 1 machine is back in 19th. He is driving, whoa, he's one of those Porsche GT3s, and on by goes one of the Audis. I think, is that Oren Laskin in the 740 Audi R8? Yes, it is. So some good battles all the way through the field. Up in front, though, it's still Parmet out in front by just about a second. Then Sam Michaels in the number 16 CrowdStrike AWS Mercedes AMG GT3. Then Jeff in the number 3. He is in one of those beautiful McLarens. Then Scott Michaels in the 34 BMW. And Ryan, he's been climbing forward.
He has. He's been on a charge. It's been fun to kind of keep an eye on that graphic on the left side of the screen that shows where everyone's running at the moment, and to watch the progress that Scott's been able to put together. The other Michaels, though, was doing a great job hanging with Parmet early on, but that last lap, Parmet put a really clean lap together and extended that lead by nearly half a second in that one lap alone. So I'm not sure exactly what went wrong, but at the moment, Parmet's got this field pretty well covered. It's been impressive to see what he's done from the start.
Here's Ian Burleson in the Orion Motorsports 720 as he rolls through turn number 10. Got Robbie Montanola and Bill Clark behind him in the Porsche 911 GT3R. This reminds me a lot of the 911s that we saw at Le Mans a couple of years ago with the that classic Porsche livery. Ryan, you probably know a whole lot more about that than I do, but it made me think of that.
Yeah, it's the classic pink pig livery, and it goes back quite a ways in Porsche's history. But yes, they did. They ran that in 2018. There was also a, we'll just call it a cigarette brand that was represented with a classic livery on one of the other factory cars. And Porsche's really been doing a lot with this here in the last couple of years, using some of the big races as an opportunity to celebrate the brand's heritage and break out some of the old paint schemes that are well ingrained into the memories of those of us that have been following the sport for a long time, and the Pink Pig is definitely a favorite. I don't think the original Pink Pig was actually that successful, but everybody loved the paint scheme so much that they brought it back, even though it wasn't one that did all that well. And if I'm remembering this right, the retro car, I guess, that's using that heritage livery back in 2018, I think it won its class at Le Mans, representing the Pink Pig. So it does have some history.
I think you're right. Here's Chris Walsh up the inside of Michael Hertzen in the 71, and he will go through and pick up what is now 11th position on the racetrack. So we're 10 minutes into this race here, Kevin. So far, the early laps of this were a little bit physical. Now we've got a breakaway at the front by Parmet by about 1.5 seconds. This is sort of where you fall into line and start running your own laps. Do you like having someone to chase, like a rabbit perhaps in a race, or do you prefer kind of getting clean racetrack and being able to run your own pace?
Well, I mean, I think every driver would choose to be up front as a first choice. It's a lot easier to kind of maintain your position than it is to kind of battle by someone. And I think what we're seeing here is all the cars kind of spread out. Is you're going to see a lot of the cars be a little bit more methodical about how they pass and where they position, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now.
Great battle here between Robbie Montanola and I believe that's the 3 car of Jeff. And Ryan, we did see Robbie fall back a little ways. I think he's had some dramas, was 4 seconds slower that lap alone. We're going to have a look out here to driver's right, but he's fallen down the order just a little bit, not a charge back to the front.
I think he's carrying too much downforce, because I've noticed on the straightaways that there have been a couple of times that he's just been eaten alive there, even when it looks like he got out of the previous corner pretty well. And so what we're talking about here, you see the wings on the car, and what the wings do, think of it as the opposite of what a wing on an airplane does. Those wings are angled in such a way that they create lift, but a wing on a race car actually does the opposite, uses the air to actually push the car into the track and thereby make it more stable through the corners. But the downside of that is it creates more drag, slows the car in a straight line. So striking the balance on the setup between the drag that you need for downforce and having it slippery enough through the air in a straight line that you're still fast, but you have the downforce in the corner, that's the balance that you're trying to strike. And it looks to me that Robbie might not have quite trimmed that car out, as we call it, quite enough, and it seems like he's really struggling on that main front straightaway in particular, where I've noticed he's lost a couple of positions here in the last few laps.
And I think a lot of that might be, a driver feel, right? I mean, Kevin, I'm sure you could speak to this a little bit. You'd like to have the car, feel very planted and in the racetrack, and when you pull downforce away, you're going to lose some of that in the track feel, and especially at high speeds, you're going to lose a little bit of stability. So what's your experience been like? I know your experience is mostly in TCA competition, where there's not a whole lot of downforce at play, but there is slipstream at play, so aerodynamic effects still very much a problem that you have to deal with on a daily basis at the racetrack.
Right, and I don't have a ton of experience with downforce in the real world, but in the simulator, because you don't have the physical feeling that you do from a real car, the downforce really kind of gives you some visual security. You visually feel the grip. And sometimes it's really tempting to kind of add all of that downforce so that you get that security through your vision. And then, just like Ryan is saying, that really hurts you on the straightaways, especially on a track like this that has a really long front straightaway, and you end up losing a lot of positions, or maybe even more time than you gain through the turns and the rest of the lap.
13 minutes to go here. Sam Parmet has led since the drop of the green flag. Sam Michaels is running a little quicker right now, at least this lap alone. He was slightly slower last lap by. Chris Walsh continuing his charge on Dean in the 333 green Ferrari here through turn number 9. Big climb over the inside curve, now running all the way out to the green painted concrete in the slipstream here, using that Ferrari to push the air out of the way in front of him and basically drive in the low pressure zone behind him. Basically, imagine the Ferrari is basically a snowplow for air, Ryan, and Chris Walsh is taking advantage of that.
Yeah, that's right, and we're seeing him do his best, and if you're the car in front, there's a couple of things you can do to try and manipulate the air, moving back and forth a little bit on the straightaways to not give such an obvious slipstream opportunity. That would be one thing. And then the other element of it is, while that's very beneficial, as we talked about, in a straight line, the opposite is true in the corners because it's disrupting the air to the wings, and you need that air on the wings for downforce. So there's ways you could position your car as the leading car in a downforce type of situation like this, that you can kind of position your car to hamper the trailing car and driver a little bit. And I suspect that everybody's kind of figuring that out as they go along throughout this race, just past the halfway point. And this is also the point where I think we're going to see some cars start to get a little bit stronger and others start to fall back a little bit as the virtual tires start to wear out. That's definitely something that drivers deal with in the real world, and it's simulated very well within ACC as well.
Yeah, and not only do you have to worry about tires wearing out just from being out on the track for a little while, also how you've been driving the car. If you've been aggressive, if you've been charging the corners, sliding the car around. Kevin, I'm sure you're very aware of how much you can destroy tires by attacking the racetrack too much. So there's a balance to be struck with finding pace and making sure that you don't beat up the rubber that's keeping you stuck to the racetrack.
That's right, and it's all about basically you have to think of it as an efficiency. You want to use the least amount of steering to get around every single turn, so that you can not overwork the tire. As soon as you start overworking it or steering a little bit too much or sliding the car, then you put heat in the tires, and that the heat is a good thing, but only up to a point. If you get too much heat, then the grip starts going back down. So you have to be really careful to kind of manage that. And then also with Barcelona, it's really unique because most of the turns are kind of right turns. So the left side tires are always a little bit harder worked at this particular track. And you have to manage that. You have to kind of keep monitoring that while you're in the race, and potentially even back off just a little bit to let either the left front or the left rear tire cool back off, so you don't lose that grip.
I'll tell you who's not cooling off right now is Matt and Vinny back here battling for 16th, back and forth a couple times, Ryan. Kind of taking swipes at each other, but a great battle as you see Vinny drive way out to the gravel trap, and he's going to juke to the right. You can just see the size difference between the Bentley Continental and the Audi R8. Very different machines accomplishing the same task here today.
Amazingly, both from the Volkswagen Audi group, which is well represented on the GT3 field. Bentley part of that automotive family there, but right now advantage to the Audi and Lima, but he got up on that curb, used a little bit too much of it. That might provide Matt the opportunity to come back here. Has a little bit of a run, but clearly of the two, the Bentley is going to punch a bigger hole through the air, so not sure how much slipstream benefit the big old Bentley is going to get behind the Audi, but he'll do his best to use that to his advantage if it presents itself.
See him working the wheel back and forth, had to correct to the left in the middle of a right-hand corner, and that is an example of what we would call oversteer. Basically, in simplest terms, if you hit the wall with the back of the car, that's oversteer. You hit the wall with the front of the car, that's understeer. Kevin, I'm sure that's something you fought in your front-wheel drive Honda Civic SI TCA car, is the balance between understeer and oversteer is a very gentle line, and I know from talking with other drivers that have run that car, namely Tom O'Gorman, the Honda in particular has a pretty good balance of understeer and oversteer.
Right. The goal as a driver or an engineer is always to minimize both understeer and oversteer. You want a neutral car that essentially does exactly what you, the driver, asked for it. And the front-wheel drive car that I raced last year, you have to do that in very specific ways to kind of match the front-wheel drive nature of the car. And you have to, every one of the cars here in ACC, you have to do that a little bit different way depending on whether it's a McLaren or a Porsche or BMW or Mercedes. All of these cars take very specific little tweaks to do that. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy with racing, is kind of not only the driving, but also from an engineering standpoint, kind of finding those little knobs to turn and trying to find the perfect combination.
And that's the beauty of Assetto Corsa Competizione, is you yourself can turn those knobs. And you mentioned engineering. Well, there's quite a bit of it that goes into building the setups for these cars. And Ryan, in ACC, the drivers have the opportunity to basically adjust the car to fit their driving style. And while you can, flip some switches and stuff, if you have a basic understanding of how those things work on the real car, it'll help you make this car in the sim drive even better, which is really cool, because you can be both the engineer and the driver, or either. If you want to just tune setups, you can do that all day long. If you want to just drive, you can jump right in and go.
It is interesting, too, talking to those that have driven some of these cars in real life as well as in the sim, that there are a lot of things with the setup that does translate just like real life, but then there are some things as well that work in the virtual world that you would never try in the real world, and it's experimentation to find that. And I know it's something, too, that we've talked about on some of our SRO esports broadcasts, Kyle, where there are real-world drivers who are used to tuning on cars a certain way, going up against sim racers who this is what they do, and they are experts in getting the setup to perfection in the sim racing world, and they know those neat little tricks of the trade within the sim, and every sim is a little bit different. What works in ACC might not work on another platform quite as well, and that's the balance, or that's the challenge, I guess, for those coming from the real world racing background, trying to adapt to sim racing. Not everything is going to transfer 100% one way to the other, but there are enough things that you can kind of have a general idea at least of what to expect will work, and I think that's been really fun watching so many from the real world here in the last year during the pandemic in particular, reaching out, getting into sim racing because the real world just wasn't an option for a while there, and trying to explore the various options available within sim racing.
Just about 6 minutes to go. Great battle here. Josh Staffen attacking the inside of the number 71 of Michael Hertzen as they roll through turns number 7 and 8 and up to turn 9. And Staffen, again, we mentioned him, turned around in the first corner, fell all the way to last, which would have been 23rd position, and here he goes by the 71. That's for 12th place. This is a great recovery for Staffen, but still not quite the top 10 positions just yet. And he's a little far back to get there, but we'll see if he can.
Well, you talked about earlier how racecraft trends. Wow, that was unexpected.
Where did he come from? That's Chris Walsh. Sorry to cut you off there, Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're fine. That was stunning. But the racecraft is one thing that transitions nearly 100% from the real world to the sim world. And Michael Hertzen is a veteran of racing in the physical world now, using some of those skills to defend this position against a very experienced sim racer in Josh Staffen. I think it's kind of interesting to see them match wits here, coming from very different backgrounds, but basically with the same result. Both of them very fast, both of them very competent, but they arrived there through very different means. And
very good reaction times, too. They somehow avoided running into Chris Walsh, who went wide at turn number 10, and he was running up inside the top 10, fell back to 13th with that little exchange. So out at the front, though, it's still Sam Parmat. He has led every lap of this race so far, under 5 minutes to go, Kevin. The domination we've seen is pretty impressive, but in 5 minutes we get to turn over to our AM race, which is a little bit less experienced, a little bit more casual, and it's going to look like a completely different race, which I think will be a lot of fun.
Right. I mean, the sim racing it takes a lot of getting used to, whether you've driven a real car in a racetrack or not. So I think the race we're going to watch next is a lot of the users of ACC that are still learning some of the ropes, and either way you can have fun, whether you're running the fastest laps in the world or if you're still turning maybe your 10th lap at a track. It's fun either way.
So under 4 minutes now as we come across the line. Should be about 3 laps remaining. Sam Michaels trying to close in, but he has just burned up those tires a little bit too much in the CrowdStrike AWS Mercedes-AMG GT3. Looking a little bit deeper in the field to find some battles. Hertzen and Josh Staffen, they were going at it. Hertzen had to slow down, though. Here comes Walsh up the inside of the chicane. Couldn't quite make it stick this time, and he'll have the chicane now to try again as they exit onto the front straightaway here, Ryan. Great battle here for what is now 12th spot.
Yes, and Walsh maybe trying to poke his nose in there with the element of surprise just a moment ago. Never going to be as surprising as he was earlier in this race, appearing out of nowhere. But that's definitely part of it. Maybe attacking where your opposition doesn't expect it. Has a chance now to sit behind here for a lap or so, and I'm sure Chris is trying to figure out where he's strong relative to Michael up ahead in that Mercedes, and maybe it's a matter of just where the McLaren is a little bit stronger than the Mercedes, and vice versa at different parts of the lap. That's going to dictate in many instances where you make the attack when you ultimately elect to do so.
You know, talking about the differences between the GT3 cars, obviously they're all minor. Again, the cars are balanced very nicely and very competitively, but I'd always thought the Mercedes was, the torquey, grunty, get up and go car, but watching it this year in World Challenge, it found out that it's actually a very nicely handling car, and it actually typically struggles in the torque and kind of acceleration zones compared to the other vehicles, which is sort of counterintuitive, but it races really interestingly because it has a lot more bark than bite with the motor, but when you get to the corners, it just outdrives everything out there, and it's really cool to watch. But here comes that McLaren 720. That, of course, Chris Walsh to driver's right here into the braking zone for turn number 10.
Chris going to have to go the long way around. Hertzen doing a great job defending the preferred line, and very clean there, tracking out all the way, kind of forcing Chris to back out of it a little bit. He wasn't fully up alongside, and self-preservation kicks in. So you give up the run a little bit. You can see the tail end of that McLaren hanging out a little bit. He's got his hands full, definitely pressing hard with only, less than 2 minutes left in this race. Time's running out, and he knows it. There are not going to be many more chances to get this pass made.
Not a lot of aggression here in the last couple minutes of this race. Kevin, you've been in situations where you've had to be aggressive. There's a balance there between, getting a pass done and maybe pulling the ire of the race stewards. You don't want to get yourself in trouble. And especially just here for fun tonight, you don't want to do that and dive in too deep and almost run into the back of Hertzen. But there's always a balance with aggression and the potential to get yourself into some trouble.
That's right, and it really depends on a lot of factors. I mean, if it's the last race of a long season and passing the car in front of you means a championship or not, then you're going to take a lot more risks than maybe the first race of the season, and you're already on the podium and things like that. You really have to kind of look at the situation at both as it is on track and then also how it affects the big picture later on, and then make your kind of risk and judgment that way.
Oh, this is getting
really
dicey.
Thing is you're doing that in just matters of seconds.
Seconds for sure. How about tenths of a second? Chris Walsh right over the back of the 71. Here he comes, the driver's right now on the run down to turn number 10. Ryan getting physical out there, but well-timed move by Chris Walsh, but again, he's stuck on the outside for turn 10 the long way around.
A little bit further along this time, and if he can hang even, he might be able to force the issue, but the way that the track is laid out, it comes back to favor Hertzen just that little bit, and he's able to hang on once again. This has been a really spirited defense from Michael, using all of that experience that we talked about to his advantage.
White flag is in the air one more time around for the race leaders. This battle for 12th is still the best battle we've got on the racetrack. Here he comes up the inside of turn 16. Hertzen leaves him space. He's going to go way out to the gravel. And now it's a drag race. Mercedes versus McLaren down the front straightaway here at Barcelona.
I think it might be done this time. He's alongside. He's even past him here. Now Hertzen's going to try and come back along the inside. Oh, he's not going to have a great angle from where he's braking right there. And you see the McLaren able to sweep around the outside. He got that pass made, but he had to work for it. That was some great defensive driving from Michael Hertzen.
Really was. Oh, he's gotten out into the marbles now, all that worn off rubber chunks that have come off of the tires in that runoff area. That's a little bit slippery out there. Don't want to be on that. Out front, though, Sam Parmet in the 98 car has led every lap of this race. It wasn't a complete clinic. He was only 2.5 seconds up the road, which is a pretty small gap, all things considered. But a very nicely executed race here, Ryan, for Sam Parmet in the number 98.
Well, sometimes it's hard to be out in front like that, not to have any pressure behind, really, and just be able to lay down the laps, lap after lap for 25 minutes, not make a mistake. That is one thing. If you're talking about a football game or a basketball game, you're way out ahead. Sometimes you can't be caught, but in racing, you could stick it in the fence and ruin your race just like that. But no trouble for Sam Parmet. He gets the job done.
Sam Michaels comes home in second in the CrowdStrike AWS Mercedes-AMG GT3, and Scott Michaels in the number 34. And as you mentioned earlier, Ryan, glad they were in different cars today to more easily separate them. Here comes Zach in the number 300 Bentley. They made that car awful wide in the opening laps, and Ian Burleson in the McLaren. That was a nice tight battle there. 2/10 separated them at the start-finish line. Jeff in another McLaren. Robbie Montanola, 7th place in the number 51. And then Lucio in the number 60 Porsche. Dean in the 333 Ferrari. Josh Staffen, top 10 after being turned around in the opening lap in turn number 1. Good rebound for him.
Yeah, that's huge. Not only did he have that spin initially, but I think he spun again shortly afterwards, trying to get back on track out there in the grass. So he was way behind. So to recover to get 10th is pretty remarkable.
And it looks like Chris Walsh will come home in 12th ahead of Mike Herzen. Bill Clark split the difference between Staffen and Walsh. That was 11th for the number 92 Porsche. Then David Anderson finishes in 15th. Matt in the number 8 Bentley comes home in 16th. And Vinny, David, Pratik, and Peter, the rest of the field here, coming across the line to conclude our first race of the night. We're not done just yet, though. That was just our pro race. We have our AM race coming up here in just a few minutes. Let's have a quick look at our timetable here before we move on to that race. But Kevin, a little bit more casual experience, and as we mentioned and talked about earlier, a little bit different look to this next one, a bit more casual racing experience, which I think will be a lot of fun. I think it was one of our closer races last time out.
Yeah, that's right. And all of these races are fun in one way or another. And like I was saying earlier, it's not really all about the speed. The lap times are going to be a little bit slower, but you're still, as long as you're matched with a group of people that have similar skills and things like that, you can have a fun little race. So I think that's what we're going to see.
For sure, and in just a moment we'll head over there, so don't go anywhere just yet. For the time being, though, Ryan, tell us a little bit about this upcoming World Challenge season. Of course, we've got Sonoma on March 5th through 7th, but we've got a handful of races this year all over America. But, of course, we also got a new series, and that it being GT America, new classification. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's so much to look forward to next year. It's really exciting. Can't wait to get started. So in total, 8 rounds of the championship. And GT America will be with the rest of the series for all but one of those. That would be the trip up to Canada to Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Instead, the GT America series, I'll tell you what that's made up of in just a second. They're going to be joining the IndyCar series on the new street circuit in Nashville, Tennessee, which is really exciting. And I know a lot of the constituents are excited to be a part of that great event that is planned for the summer. I think it's in August this year. But GT America, it's basically a throwback to the old Pirelli World Challenge days with single-driver sprint racing, no pit stops, no driver changes, and multi-class racing at that, which I think will be very popular for fans and drivers both. It's also targeted at the bronze-rated gentleman drivers, so those that race as a hobby rather than as a profession, a chance to race against their peers. It'll have GT3 cars, just like we're seeing right here. Also GT4 cars, which are a step down in performance in a lot of respects, but still very exciting race cars. And then GT2, which is a little bit new for the SRO, but those are cars that don't make a ton of downforce, but massive amounts of power. They are spectacular cars. There's not a whole lot of them out there at the moment, but we had a few competing within the GT World Challenge ranks last year as part of a race within a race, and this is a great new home for them, racing alongside GT3 and GT4 machinery, and can't wait to see that get started along with the rest of the SRO America season at Sonoma, like you said, coming up in March.
So awesome racing all year round. Of course, a couple more CrowdStrike Racing League races. We've got the next one coming up later in February. That will be headed to Silverstone, which I don't think we've actually gone there yet in either of the GT World Challenge America Esports series yet, so that'll be a nice fun one to do as well. Now lining up for our AM race here, Jimmy and Adam on the front row, the 280 and number 1. 280 being one of those McLaren 720s, and then one of the Aston Martin GT3s. I don't think we saw one of these in the earlier race. Adam Youngblood in the number 1 will be rolling off with that. The CrowdStrike AWS number 1 car nonetheless. Then Jason from Operation Motorsport joining us in the number 22. Kevin, tell us a little bit about Operation Motorsport. I'm not sure if we've got Kevin stepped away for a moment as we'll touch base on that here in a little bit, but so we'll continue rolling through. Mike in the number 26 Audi, then Jackson in a beautiful looking Acura NSX GT3, then Jordan in another McLaren, Jason Barnes in an Aston. That's a really pretty shade of red on that car. Casey in the number 109, then Drew in the Lamborghini. Nope, Drew is actually in a Mercedes. That's Gianpaldo in the Lamborghini. And then Webo in the number 18, that's the Nissan GTR, and then the Kishan in the number 4 Mercedes will round out our 12-car grid for our second race here of the evening, Ryan. This is a smaller grid, which means that the chances for chaos are a little bit reduced, which is, I think, a good thing here as we run down to the middle sector of this racetrack. another 25-minute race, and this is going to all be about consistency.
Exactly right, especially for our less experienced drivers that make up the AM field here. The hardest thing, I think, to adjusting to sim racing, even if you have a track day or club racing background, is the amount of focus it takes to stay engaged in a sim race over 25 minutes and not make that crucial mistake that'll ruin your race, send you into the wall, and ultimately into the pits and out of contention. So for those that don't have a ton of sim racing experience, and that's what this AM field is really here for, this AM race, then I think the consistency, like you said, that's going to be crucial. Whoever can put together a nice, clean run for 25 minutes is going to have a really good chance at getting a podium at the end of this.
Before we go green, we'll touch back with about Jason on Operation Motorsport. Kevin, tell us briefly about Operation Motorsport and how they were helpful in your 2020 season before we get the green here.
Yeah, Operation Motorsport is a great military operation that really kind of places kind of retired or injured military members with race teams throughout the different series paddocks. And I was fortunate to have a couple of members with me this year, and I was able to share with them kind of different processes and tasks to do on the race car. And in the end, we were able to win the championship together.
That's super, super cool. A great story and a great operation they've got over there. So thanks to Jason for being with us here tonight. Jimmy and Adam on the front row going to be taking us to the green flag of our second race of the evening. This AM race will consist of a 25-minute sprint. We'll declare a winner, then move on to our second, or actually make that our third round at Silverstone in a couple weeks. Thanks for joining us here on CrowdStrike.com, CrowdStrikeRacing.com, as Jimmy Morgan and Adam Youngblood will line us up on the front row. Barcelona for our second race of the night. 12 drivers lined up. The bright orange McLaren will take us to the green, and there it is. Green flag in the air. Already a car to the inside. That's the Acura. Jackson in the Honda is going to have a look up the inside. 3 wide on the run down to turn number 1. This is going to get dicey here.
Oh boy, buckle up here. This could be pretty wild. That was a bold move up the inside. Ultimately, I think a pretty wise choice, but back behind, chaos unfolds.
That was
That's not a great start here for the Lamborghini.
Gianpaolo got kind of turned around there somehow. I'd like to go back and take a brief look at that if we could. So let's have a brief glance at how they got together. And we'll look from maybe up above. I think that might be a fairly decent angle to look. You see there's a Nissan in the background. I wonder if the Lamborghini will get hit from behind here. No, just got on the brakes a little bit too late. And it was sort of a chain reaction.
That was a great start for that teal Mercedes. Pretty aggressive from towards the back of the grid, but able to make a nice couple of moves there at the start and make some clean passes.
That's Drew Rutledge.
In that car. And looks like it's gone awry since then, so there you go. The broadcaster's jinx taking it in here tonight. Sorry about that, Drew.
Out front, though, it's Adam in the number 1. He leads the way into turn number 10. That is that 01 CrowdStrike AWS Aston in behind him. Jimmy in the 280, and then Jason Leach in the 22 car, holding on to third place right now. And that was a good start for him and for, I should say, the 1 car who went middle 3 wide and ended up leaving the first sector with the race lead. So an aggressive start there, Kevin. A pretty good climb to start this race, and sometimes it's good to be aggressive at the start and catch people off guard.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance, because you want to be aggressive and take advantage of all the cars being kind of bunched up and really close, because if you can get maybe a half a second advantage when all the cars are covered by less than that, then you can go from 5th to 1st if you plan it right. But at the same time, there's a lot of risk with taking big moves, so sometimes you have to kind of be a little bit methodical and maybe wait a little bit later in the race to really make your move.
Nice, good start for these two out front. And one of the beautiful things about this AM race here is that this is really just more of a team building exercise and just sort of a fun evening event for everybody at CrowdStrike and AWS and SRO, Ryan. So a lot of these people coming in here tonight have very little, if any, experience in Assetto Corsa Competizione. And really, honestly, that was a pretty good start, all things considered. And just here to have fun. And that's the beauty of racing games, is you can just be here to have fun, or you can take it super uber seriously and run the fastest lap times of the day. But sometimes having fun is more fun.
And this looks like fun right here. How about this battle? Jimmy Morgan really putting the pressure on the Aston Martin up ahead. This is for the race lead, and we got some lap traffic up ahead. That could spice things up a little bit here before it's all said and done. Actually, pretty good job there by whichever car that was. That looks like Keyshawn there are able to pull off track and out of the way, but now back on track, unfortunately, and the third place car not quite as lucky as our leaders, but nevertheless, really good battle up front, and that's as fun as it gets. If you can find a peer, somebody who runs about the same speed that you do, and you can have a race-long battle for position, that's what sim racing is all about, and I think that's what these two are going to have in store here. Hopefully they can enjoy the opportunity to race with someone of a pretty equal skill level, it would appear.
And as you mentioned, it's always a fun time to have one other guy to run with and kind of go back and forth a few times. Talking about teamwork specifically, Kevin, in the TCA category, running the lower powered cars, we talked about draft a little bit earlier tonight. Did you ever have to work with anybody on the racetrack in terms of pushing or shoving or bump drafting to make speed at some of the bigger racetracks?
There wasn't a lot of bump drafting, but there was, I think it was every man for himself in the draft. So especially at a place like Circuit of Americas or Road America, you kind of, if you were out front, you needed to have a big gap because it didn't matter who was behind you, they were going to be trying to draft by. So it's definitely, even in a low horsepower car, the draft can mean the difference between a position. You can completely gain a whole car length over someone. So you definitely have to defend over the draft when you're in the lead, and you have to kind of plan for it and take advantage of it when you're fighting for a position from behind.
Couple cars having a bit of an off-track moment there. The 109 Acura going a little wide behind them. Webbo in the 18, and that 519, which we saw turned around in the first corner, running the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo. This is a really cool car, Ryan. I don't think we saw any of these in the pro race earlier tonight. Very similar, and actually, I think mechanically identical or very close to identical to the Audi R8 LMS, of which Mike in the 26 car just up the road has one of those. Really just the only difference is the skin on top of the chassis, making the difference between these two cars.
Yep, that's right. Sister brands in a lot of respects, and they do share pretty much the same infrastructure under that arrow. There are some other components that do differ, but by and large, yeah, there are. Oops, that's a bit of a wild moment there for Mike. Able to get away with it without hitting anything, though, so that's a good place to start.
Whew. There goes the Lamborghini, knocking over some of the foam arrows on the side of the racetrack to denote the edge of the track, and a bit of a stack up there in that chicane. That's sort of a choke point on this racetrack. Everything gets very, very narrow through there, Ryan, and especially if someone gets turned around sideways, it's hard to miss it.
It does. It's funny, we were talking about the two cars, how similar they were, and they both took kind of the same wild ride through that part of the track. Here comes the Audi trying to make a move on the Lamborghini. They should be pretty similar in their performance, and really all of the cars should in a lot of respects because of the balance of performance that is put in place to try and equalize the different platforms. But that said, those two do share a whole lot of similarities, as we were talking about. And this Lamborghini in particular has really come on strong as of late. The Evo package that they homologated recently, which is basically an update to a previous generation of this car, has made it even more competitive than it was to begin with. And they've really had some breakthrough performances, most notably in the 24 Hours of Daytona in the last few years. A bunch of class wins there. Other major endurance races, Lamborghini has come on strong, and their investment into GT racing is pretty well unparalleled. That's a bit of a wild ride there, though.
519 goes for a dive up the inside in turn 7. Can't make it stick. Will drop behind Drew in the Mercedes, and good-looking shade of teal on this car. A couple battles going on the racetrack in front of these guys. Mercedes will move past the Honda NSX, the pink car. That's the 109. And great battles back here. This has got to be so much fun to just jump in here, Kevin, and to hang out with your friends and coworkers and to go back and forth on the racetrack and share some smack talk after the fact. I'm sure this will be a lot of fun in the office or in the virtual office to talk about tomorrow.
That's right, and a lot of my most fun races, looking back, both virtual and in the real world, are kind of whenever you had a close run with another car that was equally matched, and just like we're seeing here, everything's being pretty clean and the positions keep getting swapped back and forth, and this is a great way to learn from the other cars too, because you might see one of the other competitors faster in one area or slower in another, and you can actually learn from that to go faster as well.
Well, this is a great battle off into turn one. And Ryan, I think we've learned a bunch by now, especially here in esports, that often the show is not always at the front of the field, that they're putting on a spectacular effort back here to make this entertaining.
Yeah, this is great stuff. 3 cars, similar pace right here, taking very different lines through this corner. Another wild ride for Gianpaolo in the Lamborghini, and unfortunately the NSX gets caught up in that. That's going to be costly for both.
Yeah, that might be a conversation in the virtual meeting tomorrow morning between these two. But looks like the 109 will have to get rolling again forward. Meanwhile, at the front of the field, we talked about the front two and how they were kind of working together. Jimmy a little bit offline there at the exit of turn 15, but still 0.7 of a second between these two with 15 minutes to go. There's still a chance this could flip around the other way.
Yeah, Adam's not been able to shake Jimmy to this point in the race. Every once in a while the gap will increase like this, but next thing you know, well, the McLaren will be right there back up on the back of the Aston again. Look at the British representation at the front of this field. An Aston and 2 McLarens. We saw the Bentley well represented in our previous race. And yeah, it's interesting to see the British brands doing so well here in this racing here tonight. But I think these two are the class of the field so far. They've proven that through the first 10 minutes of this race. And I'd be curious if Jimmy Morgan was able to make that pass, if he wouldn't be able to pull away a little bit. I think we've seen some evidence that perhaps this is the fastest car and driver combination if he can get some clean laps and get out in front of the Aston up ahead. But that's going to be a difficult proposition.
Lap traffic going to make this interesting as well. There goes Adam around the outside of Keyshawn in the number 4. Jimmy continues to try to close this gap. I'm also noticing here on the dashboard of this McLaren, this sort of anti-glare coating, this Alcantara-esque material. Kevin, I'm curious about driver comfort, and not only visually, but also in terms of your seating position, in terms of any kind of gadgets you've got in the car, that sort of thing. What and from a driver comfort perspective did you have in your race car to help you do your job better as a race car driver?
Well, the car I raced in 2020 is based on an OEM Honda Civic, and because of that, there's not actually a lot of things you need to worry about, because the Honda as a manufacturer has already created a dashboard that kind of minimizes glare and reflection back onto the windshields. We don't need the flocking that we see here on the McLaren, but the main focus is all about your seating position and steering wheel position, and trying to just be in a comfortable seating position so that you don't kind of put extra stress on your hands or your arms, so that you don't get fatigued during the whole race. So on a simple car like that, it's really just the seating position. But these GT3s, because of the higher G-forces and the higher speeds that you're dealing with, there's a lot more nuances, and you actually start getting custom seats and molds so that you fit in the car even better. And it's one of those things where if you're uncomfortable as a driver, it's a distraction, and it'll take away from your focus on track, and in turn you'll be going slower or maybe make mistakes.
And talking about maybe driver aids of any kind, Ryan, there's a lot of electronics in these GT3 cars that Kevin's car probably doesn't have, at least not adjustable in any sense. Here in the GT3 category, you've got highly adjustable anti-lock braking systems and traction control and all sorts of other gadgetry and gizmos inside these cars to help the drivers out, whereas something like Kevin's car would more likely have OEM ABS to help slow the car down. But you get the option to adjust some of that here. Although I imagine that some of these drivers probably won't mess with that too much, Ryan. They'll probably just focus on driving the car.
Definitely in the AM race, I'd be surprised if we saw the virtual driver reach down there and twist the knob. That's one of my favorite things that ACC put into the game was if you make the adjustment on your steering wheel at home, it's represented actually with the character model within the car itself. That's pretty cool. But if you're talking about people at the top end of sim racing, that's a huge part of getting the car to handle the way that you want it to, and to stay on top of it as the handling changes over the course of a full tank fuel run. So you're going to be a lot lighter at the end of the fuel run because you've burned off the fuel. The tires are going to be a lot different as they heat up and wear over the course of the run. So trying to get that dialed in and knowing what each adjustment does and how much of it to dial in or out to get the feeling the way that you want it, that's so crucial. It looks like Adam drifted a little bit wide there that time, and that opened the door up the inside, and we've got a new leader of this race here, guys.
Yeah, Jimmy has just gone to the top spot. Some lap traffic in front of him would make this really interesting as we approach turn number 7 alongside the bright red Aston Martin. That, I believe, is Jason in the 314. Yes, it is. That's going to get really dicey there, and Adam got held up behind the other Aston just a little bit, which will let Jimmy drive away as we are past the halfway point here.
No cooperation between the two Astons there. We've got a Mercedes off track and now back on track right in front of our second place car. That was a frightening moment, I am sure. Now late on the brakes there, the red Aston. That might have just cleared the track for Adam. Not sure that's how he envisioned that going, but able to get through there. He read that pretty well. Back to the driver aids. I am curious, Kevin, what kind of aids are available for you in your TCA spec car in TC America?
Just like Kyle mentioned earlier, it's actually just OEM ABS. It's the OEM car comes with stability control and traction control and kind of some more advanced stuff like that. But in the race season, or the kind of the homologation deletes all of that, and we're left with ABS. And even in that car, we're not using the ABS a ton. It's more the Civic being so a front-wheel drive car doesn't have a lot of weight on the rear tires. So the ABS is more about keeping the rear tires from locking, but on the front, you don't really want to use it very much because you can actually slow down less using that ABS than you do if you stay out of it.
Interesting.
It's always interesting to hear about drivers specifically talking about anti-lock braking systems and traction control. There to help the driver in many respects at the higher levels of competition in some of the faster cars where, in a GT3 car, you might just slam the pedal to the floor and let the ABS do the work for you. But there's a lot different from a programming and hardware perspective on the GT3 spec ABS versus something like what's in the Honda Civic from I don't want to say a normal car perspective, but a street car perspective versus a race car. So an interesting discussion for sure. 9 minutes left to go in this race here. Jimmy out front by 2.2 seconds. I think Adam's going to have a chance to drive back up there, but not like that. He has had a big off at turn number 10.
Well, it's a different perspective when you become the hunter instead of the hunted, and some thrive in one scenario more so than the other. I know that in the limited racing I've done, I'm much better if I'm trying to chase somebody than I am out in front with somebody in my mirrors. And that's now the position that Jimmy Morgan finds himself in after being the chaser for so long. I wonder if perhaps Adam was a little bit happier out in front, not trying to run anybody down and without the pressure now of trying to go back and take that spot he lost right back just a few laps later, hopefully.
Jordan in the 33 McLaren working through turns 10, 11, and 12. And Drew in this Mercedes, for all the damage it has, running in 7th and continuing to roll around the racetrack. This is a pretty good rebound. Got through the opening turn collision pretty well, then was involved somewhere else on the other half of the first lap and got significant damage. Not a whole lot of fun to drive with damage. Kevin, is that something you ever had to deal with, is driving with any sort of damage in any way, whether suspension or mechanical?
Unfortunately, yes, and it's a huge exercise in adaptation because I think one of my most memorable kind of occurrences of that, I actually was driving over a fender liner and thought I had a flat tire or something like that because the car only wanted to turn one direction. But fortunately, the fender liner was made out of plastic, and it only took about a half a lap for it to melt away, and suddenly the car behaved completely different again. So the damaged car, you really have to kind of adapt, and it could change from corner to corner or lap to lap, and it's not something that I look forward to, but it was a lot. It was a good experience when I did it.
It's always good to get some practice in the worst of conditions to help you for the best of conditions, I'm sure. There's a couple other drivers back here have some damage, including Gianpaolo in the Lamborghini, who had a turn 1 incident. 6-second gap out front, though, Ryan. Watching that gap increase 3 seconds quicker last time by for Jimmy. We'll see if that increases this time again. But under 7 minutes to go, this is looking less and less likely that Adam can get back to the race lead.
I got to say thanks to Jimmy. He's making me look a little smarter than I am. I speculated that he might be quicker and might be able to pull away if he got out in front, and that appears to be the case at the moment. So thanks to you for making me look good there and doing a great job navigating traffic. We have cars that are running at very different speeds. Oof. And a lot of moments like that that our leaders have had to fight through at various times. And look, that's part of the learning curve. This is tough. If you don't have a lot of sim racing experience and you jump right into a race with some people who are on it, it's worth noting our leaders are turning some pretty good lap times. It's a tough situation to get into. Hopefully everyone's still having fun. That's the point of being out here, certainly in the AM race. But you are seeing the varying levels of experience and perhaps the varying amounts of practice that were put in coming in on display, and it's led to some heart-in-the-throat moments for our leaders who have had to negotiate some difficult situations with cars sliding on and off the track in front of them.
I have to wonder. Everyone says they're here for fun, Kevin, but I bet you once the green flag drops, I bet you they get real competitive under the virtual helmet. I'm sure you felt that in the races as well, where you go in there going, I'm going to have fun today, and then as soon as the green flag flies, it's all about serious business. So it's kind of interesting to see some of these drivers really get into it and start racing super competitively, because it's been pretty fun. Look at Jackson juking to the left to miss the Mercedes. But a lot of fun so far, and it's also been a pretty good race in terms of dodging and weaving a little bit, which is a skill, Kevin, I'm sure you've had to do as well.
Yeah, I've definitely had some close calls in real life and virtually before. So you have to stay on your toes for sure, and just to like for racing for fun for me doesn't exist anymore. It's as soon as my helmet's on and I'm behind the wheel, I don't get any more serious than that. So, but it's still interesting, because when I get out, I think back and it's so much fun to do that. So in a way, it's kind of a mix for me.
What's it like to sit down after a day of racing and go back? Do you watch your races, the replays of the broadcasts, and watch it from as a fan perspective, or is it strictly business for you, where you get out and think about how can I improve and do better next week, and you spend all the time working on the car?
Sometimes I'll watch the broadcast just to see some of the things that happen that I can't see from behind the wheel, but for the most part, I can replay the kind of highlight reel from kind of my own perspective through the race. I know the things that went well, and I've made a note kind of while driving things that didn't, and I try to work on those things to kind of minimize the things that didn't go well for the next race.
Always interesting to use any sort of data too. AWS and CrowdStrike protecting and utilizing data. Of course, AWS had some cool integrations this year, Ryan, from a broadcast perspective, showing us some of the top speeds and cornering speeds and that sort of thing. Those are some really neat broadcast integrations. That was always fun to see, to compare specifically the entry speeds to the S's at Circuit of the Americas. We saw 10, 12 mile an hour differences between GT3 cars, between the Porsches and the Acuras and that sort of thing. So that was really cool. I wish we could have that here in Assetto Corsa Competizione, because I think it kind of bring a new look to some of these broadcasts if we could really have a deep dive into data like AWS and CrowdStrike do.
That just gives us more to chew on in the broadcast, and admittedly, I didn't get to play around with that a whole lot down in the pit lane where I spent the year last year. But nevertheless, it does. I know I heard Greg and Cal talking about it at various times. And it just gives you more information, a better way to understand the race if you're a fan watching from home, or some of the teams that I'm sure are watching and gathering data. As Adam Youngblood goes on a wild ride there, that's our second place car. That drive back to the lead just got a little bit more difficult for Adam after that contact there. I don't think that was of his making, and it's been tough out there trying to get through the lap traffic.
Yeah, once he lost that lead, it's just been a slippery slope where he's continued to lose time. Now about 11 seconds, where Jimmy Morgan out front should be coming to the white flag or close to it next time by in the McLaren 720. And he has played this race very smart, Ryan. Not a lot of scratches on that car. He's done a good job staying out of messes and has just driven a very clean and smart race. And looking at the fastest lap times of the day, he is the fastest car in this race. But, you know, I think it's all about the consistency, and that's how he's gotten himself to the front and stayed there.
Well, you mentioned that right off the top of the broadcast, and I think it was a really good point and well made, and we've seen that play out. Fast and consistent, Kevin. That's a good combination. That's about as good as it gets for a race car driver, right?
Yeah, that's right. You don't want to be slow and consistent or fast and inconsistent. Those things might be good for qualifying, but for the race, you really have to have both. So it's great to see that put together here.
So with 1 minute and 24 seconds remaining, this will be our final lap this time around at Barcelona. And before we get into the post-race show here, a reminder that the next race will happen in February at Silverstone Circuit for CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League round number 3. And again, if you'd like to learn more about the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League and how to join, you can visit CrowdStrikeRacing.com to learn more. So Morgan working through some lap traffic. That's Drew in front of him in the number 2 Mercedes, who we talked about earlier is having a bit of bad luck at the beginning, but has driven a nice clean race since then. And we'll see if Jimmy can squeeze on by here in turn number 4, and he will do so on the inside. Back through some others that we haven't talked about in a little while. How about Jason Leach in the Operation Motorsport number 22? He's entering his final lap. Started this race in 3rd or 4th. Here he is running 4th. So I'd say, Ryan, that he's had a pretty good day. And bring home a top 5 with minimal damage on that car is a massive success.
That's a good point. It's been nice and clean for the Operation Motorsport car. Jason Leach doing a nice job keeping that car shiny side up, nice and clean, not many scratches on it, and that is going to result in a good finish if he can keep it together for one more lap here.
Out front, Jimmy Morgan completely free and clear of any more traffic. Coming through the last chicane here at Barcelona. Watch the curbs on the right, watch the curbs on the left under the GT World Challenge bridge. And Jimmy Morgan in the number 280. Started on pole, was able to hang on to it. One more corner to negotiate. Turn number 16 onto the front straightaway. At Barcelona, it's Jimmy Morgan in the 280 McLaren across the line there. He wins CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League round number 2 in the AM category. Adam Youngblood in the number 1. Led this race for a little while, but couldn't hang on to it. Will come home in 2nd. Jackson in the number 23 in the Honda NSX, a little ways back. He's got Jason Leach in behind him. This could get a little dicey before this is over. Battle for position here for 3rd, Ryan.
Last step on the podium up for grabs. That's a lot of incentive right there, and it looks like Leach is chomping at the bit to try and get this done. He's been coming on strong here on this lap.
Couple more corners. Jason looks to the inside. Shallow entry by Jackson. Jason leaves plenty of space. There's a lap car out in front of them. Might have an opportunity out of turn 16 if he can arc this corner nicely. Gets a good run built up here, though, but the 23 Honda just pulls away. Jason throttles up, though, for turn 16, coming back to the checkers. Fireworks exploding overhead. Jackson, last step on the podium in the 23. And Jason Leach brings the 22 Operation Motorsport car home in 4th. Jordan Peterson in the number 33 car. Some damage on that McLaren. He will round out the rest of the top 5. Dramatic ending there for 3rd place. That was a good battle.
It was. That's what we like to see. Again, finding a peer to race with. That's an awful lot of fun, and great job by both to be able to put on a good show and also to do it in a clean fashion.
In just a moment, we'll go over our race results. But in 2021, CrowdStrike's goal is to win as one. Whether you're a security analyst combing lines of code for anomalies, the head engineer calling strategy, or behind the wheel of a race car yourself, we're proud to call you one of us. In the cloud, on the track, anywhere, victory will be achieved through the power of we. We win. So in just a moment, we'll take you through our post-race results here for our AM race in the 2nd race of the evening. Here is a look. And Ryan, I think we saw a pretty good battle up at the front between Jimmy and Adam, but also towards the back there were some really great battles between Drew, Webbo, Jordan, Gianpaolo, and more. they all had a pretty good fight there about halfway through the race.
Yeah, exactly. So great fights up and down the field. Some good, clean racing by and large, and a remarkably clean start, all things considered. They have a little bit of contact back in the field, but that set the stage for a good battle up at the front for the first half of this race, and some good fights all throughout the field. It was a second consecutive impressive showing from our AM group going back to the first round at the Nürburgring, and it's carried over here into the new calendar year in 2021 as well.
Kevin Boehm joining us here, 2020 TC America Rookie of the Year in the TCA category. Kevin, thanks for joining us here tonight. Take us through your thoughts on the evening. We saw some great battles in Pro and some fun action in the AM race. Your thoughts on tonight and heading to our next race at Silverstone in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we saw great racing in both races, and I think really you see kind of from the AM race, we saw the guys who were just kind of learning the ropes and getting their kind of dipping their toe in sim racing, and then we saw the pro race where there was really close battles and a lot of action out there. So it's really great to see kind of both perspectives on that tonight. And Silverstone's going to be a great race to watch because it's such a fast-flowing track. It's really tricky. Another one that takes a lot of track knowledge to go really fast there. So I can't wait to see what happens there.
And Ryan, we've got the Real World Challenge schedule kicking off in March 5th through 7th at Sonoma Raceway in California. We've got our virtual racing league continuing on February 11th, but your final thoughts on tonight and looking ahead not only to the next virtual race here in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League, but also the Real World Challenge season in March.
Yeah, we're starting to get close, aren't we? It's a good time of year. Everybody's plans are starting to come in line. We've got some exciting announcements here recently on the news side for SRO America, and it's great to have our friends with CrowdStrike a big part of this once again, and great to interact with them here in the virtual racing world. It'll be fun to have the real world racing and the sim racing overlapping a little bit for the first part of this year. I'm excited to see what both have in store for us. Not much longer now.
As always, a big thank you to CrowdStrike, AWS, World Challenge, and more. Thanks to everyone who helped us put this together. SRO, Champion Motorsports, Operation Motorsport, the Page Group, CrowdStrike, AWS, and everyone else that has come on board to help the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League exist and flourish. We'll see you again on February 11th at Silverstone Circuit for the third round of the season. I'm Kyle Heyer with Ryan Marine and Kevin Boehm. We'll see you next time on CrowdStrike Racing.